Hello folks, so today I'm actually going to talk about the option of doing a little bit more within InDesign as far as text stuff. So as many of you who have, you'll see certain text documents as like one of the things that I absolutely do not like at all is the fact that if you put it in a color, which I've seen a lot of my students do, is they have a color in their text box and this is what they leave it as. So it's like if I were to just make this shorter and stuff like that, you see the text kind of goes right to the edge. There's no breathing room per se for that, which makes it look like an awful design. Right? If you have text that goes around inside a text box, you want to make sure that you have some kind of space to actually have it space around that particular document. So how do we get around that? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can go ahead and right click, or on a Mac with a mouse, you can hit control click onto your text document. And if you go down to the very top, you kind of see that there's an option called text frame options. This is what we're going to be concentrating a lot on today. So if I choose that, I've got this text frame options box that kind of shows up. If I hit make sure preview is checked, I can incorporate a lot of items into this. So like let's say we wanted to go ahead and add in like maybe more columns. Let's say we go ahead and add in like 3 columns, let's say. Or in the case here, I'm just going to change it to 2, which then you can go ahead and add a gutter. The width there refers to the actual width of the each of the columns. So if I go ahead and make that first column a little bit wider, and add the other one, which makes the whole text box bigger. I mean, don't necessarily want that sometimes, but it'll make that width of that text box bigger. Same thing goes if I make it 1 column, it'll make the width of that much bigger. So if I make 2, it'll look at each column as how wide that particular one is. All right. Now below that is what's called an inset spacing. What that refers to is giving space between the edge of the text box and the text itself. Kind of like adding margins within its own text box. So if I include more margin or more spacing, that allows me to kind of like space it out a little bit more, like so. If I uncheck this, I can add a little bit more to the top, or I can add a little bit more to the bottom if I so choose. That is totally up to however your design is working. So like right now I have this particular thing here, and that kind of works great for what I wanted to do. Vertical justification allows it to kind of like align towards the top, or center, or bottom, or justify. I'm going to go ahead and kind of like work with that here in just a moment. But if I go to column rules, if I go ahead and insert column rule, it will go ahead and add a rule or a line in between each of the columns. The length of it can vary. If I make it smaller, I can make it smaller. I can go ahead and make it like a start in a certain area. I can lengthen it out a little bit more. I can uncheck this and work with each individual start and end, however I want it to lay out. All right. So horizontal position, I can go ahead and position a little bit more, either towards off center or to the right or left of its horizontal position. Okay. I can also change the stroke of it. If I go ahead and increase the stroke, I can add a little bit more like width to that line. I can also change what type of line it is. Maybe go thick, thin, or whatever, as well as its color if I so choose that, and its tint of that color. Like let's say I want to go ahead and change this to a solid, and I want to make it 50% of that particular color. Make it 50 there. There you go. It's a little lighter there. We'll get back to that here in just a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK for a second, and I'm going to actually turn off this color. I don't want this color in the background. So I'm going to click on this and hit Apply None, which allows me to kind of like see this particular line that's there. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to this one right here that allows me to kind of like align, figure out what I wanted to do. If I wanted this to be like, let's say, a colored box, let's say we make that green with a white color. Let's say we make white. And there we are. Now I want it centered in a box, so I'll go ahead and hit center. And then I increase the size of it, just like so. Now, one of the things is you look at the space up here versus the space down here, and that's not what I want. So if I go to my text frame options here, I can go to where it says vertical justification, and I can hit center. And you can kind of see what it does is it tries to center it within it from the top and the bottom in that area, which is really nice. If I go ahead and hit OK, I can go ahead and make this box bigger, and it will continue to make that particular centered space work for me. Okay. All right. Now, what we also want to do is I have an image here that I want to go ahead, and I've seen a lot of my students do this. They want to go ahead and make this text kind of like wrap around an object of some kind. Doesn't matter what it is, but they want to wrap it around that particular object. So if I go ahead and I click on this, if I go over to my right, you're going to see what's called a text wrap function. And you're going to see that there's several buttons. Now, a lot of these work in the same way, but I'm actually going to go up to Window, and I'm going to go where it says Text Wrap. Those functions are there. It's just a little bit different in the case where I have a little bit more options to kind of like work with. So right now, with this first button here, which is the same one that it is over here, it basically says no text wrap. There's no text wrap whatsoever in that area. This one will go ahead and wrap around the box. So if I go ahead and go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back, you're seeing that what the text is doing is it's actually wrapping around the box itself, not around the woman here. This third option was just called Wrap Around Object Shape. If I go ahead and click on that, you're going to get this. And what it does is looks at the object that's there, and kind of like wraps around it. Now it determines that by its wrap like contour options, but here we want to wrap to both either the right side or the left side or both right and left sides or side towards spine, which if this was a facing pages document, it would actually look for the spine for that. But we're going to do both right and left. In the contour options area, it says select subject. It looks for the subject itself. If I went to bounding box, it would look for the bounding box of the image. You would also detect the edges of it, which does a pretty good job here in the case where it looks at high contrast areas, which the contrast is fine on this particular image, but on some images it's just not there. So it'd have a hard time detecting its edges. If it had a clipping path, it could actually look at the clipping path for it, or its graphic frame, which is what the frame that is in here. But it's using this technology to use AI to kind of like recognize what is the subject of it. Very similar to what Photoshop has in their particular arsenal, to be able to select a subject. And in this case, we do have the subject here. Now, what's really nice is it allows me to create this line here. And if you remember this line, looking back at Illustrator, you kind of remember that each one of these points here refers to another anchor point. I can actually modify these, make them work for me. If I don't want a certain area, I can go ahead and kind of like tweak these to kind of like make them kind of like not wrap in a certain area. Just kind of like give it a little bit more space there if I so want to. Now I'm going to undo all that because I do have something else that I forgot to show. And this is the case where it says top offset. Right now, since it is a very organic shape, a lot of these boxes are grayed out because there is no like left, right, bottom, side. It's just kind of like all uniform. So I can go ahead and increase that to kind of like increase the amount of wrap that it has around it. You don't want it to be really close to an edge like this. This wording here is not good. So I can increase that, or even in the sake of sometimes I can decrease it if I want it to, but I don't want it to. I'm going to increase that so I give it a little bit more space around the subject in that case, and then I can go ahead and tweak these points any way I want to. So that allows me to kind of like put in a text wrap around certain things. All right. So hopefully that kind of helped, and hopefully it gave you a little bit more insight as to what goes on within what you can do with these text frames. So, till the next time.